Здравствуйте, товарищи. Welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda. We're on day 73, and today we're adding the dative plural endings. So again, we're on day 2 of, yesterday we did the prepositional plural, today the dative plural, tomorrow the instrumental plural. And again, really more than anything, this is a good chance to review the singular endings because again, the plural endings are so incredibly easy. So it would be a great idea to try to really learn all the dative endings here today, including now the new ones, the plural ones. Here's a poster. Колхозом, совхозом, машино-тракторным станциям, электроэнергию. Okay, so you see the endings. You can probably guess already that's dative plural. I remember yesterday for prepositional we had ach for nouns. And again, that ending ach works for all genders in the plural. The only other possible ending would be yach, right, the soft version of ach. So pretty much the same thing we saw yesterday. Kolchozim, right, to the collective or for the collective forms. It's a right dative plural indirect object. Mashina traktornym stanциям. Right there we see an adjective right? Is going to be our adjectival ending in the dative plural. Stanциям, there's a soft noun with yam in the dative plural. And right, then we have a direct object, электроэнергию. And there's a nice example in Russian you've probably seen in a lot of these posters how you can get an idea across just with case endings. We don't even have a verb here, right? The idea is let's give. Well, give what? Электроэнергия, which appears here in the accusative. And then we have several direct objects indirect to all of these collective forms, state forms, machine and tractor stations. Okay, so let's review dative singular. Again, this is old hat in theory, right? Masculines and neuters are taking omu. Feminines are taking oi for adjectives. And then, of course, we have the soft versions of those, yemu or ye. And for nouns, we expect u for masculines and neuters. You would be the soft version. Feminine nouns are taking yeah, and since that ending is already inherently soft, there's no separate soft version of that, right? It's yeah for all feminines. Now again, let's go through our inventory of just basic examples here. Nevsky Prospect, here using po, which takes the dative, right? Along Nevsky Prospect would be po Nevskому Prospektu. That's a hard masculine. Around the summer garden in Petersburg, that would be po letnему саду, right? Letny there is a soft adjective. Kreml is a soft masculine noun, right? So po Kremlyu would be around the Kremlin if you're touring the Kremlin or something. And finally, Tverskaya Ulitsa, there's a feminine. Along Tverskaya Street in Moscow would be po Tverskoi Ulitse. Okay, now remember a few sort of important exceptions, right? Special soft feminines like Raisia will take EE in the dative, right? Po Raisi. Now note here that the other special softs, masculines and neuters, they would take U, right? They would act normally. So it's only the feminines here that we have to worry about in the dative. Finally, e-nouns, right, feminine e-nouns, they take E, right, so they do their own thing. And, that's something we didn't know in the last book when we were first learning the dative singular endings. Okay, so let's practice giving a few of these, and these are all spaces. So we're going to, just for practice, we're going to use the preposition po, which means along a path or around some open space like a park or whatever. Okay, so we just need to use the dative after po by definition. So let's try this. Dvarsovaya ploshchad. Okay, ploshchad is a feminine e-noun, right? And we can tell that here because we have an adjective to go with it, dvarsovaya. So we can see that ploshchad is feminine. And so around Palace Square in Petersburg, that would be po Dvarsovai ploshchadi. Around the summer garden, again, would be po letnemu sadu. Along the embankment of the Fontanka River in Petersburg, that would be po nabережной Fontanki. Now note that Fontanki remains in the genitive, right? We have the embankment of the Fontanka. So the only thing we're changing here is embankment, right? Along the embankment, po nabережной. 4 along Nevsky Prospect in Petersburg, по Невскому проспекту. 5 Tverskaya Ulitsa, again in Moscow. That's one of the main streets right in the middle of Moscow. По Tverskoi Ulitse. 6 Moskovsky Kreml, around the Moscow Kremlin. Remember, there are multiple Kremlins in Russia, the Moscow one being the largest, of course. По Moskovskому Kremlyu. Kreml is an in-stressed noun. Soft, by the way, Kremlyu. So along or across the Palace Bridge in Petersburg, which runs across the Neva, right alongside the Winter Palace, that would be по Дворцовому мосту. Most also being an in-stressed noun. Okay, 8, Tretyakovskaya Galeria, that's the big Russian art museum in Moscow. So if we were strolling around the gallery, it would be по Tretyakovskaya Galeria, right? So note that ending, yeah, there, right? Yeah, replacing ya. Volga, so down the Volga or along the Volga River would be по Volге. 10, along the steppe. Steppe, if you don't know, is just basically like an open plain, especially in southern Russia, at least in the European part of Russia, right? And that was one reason Russia historically has been vulnerable to attack, right? It's, from the south along the steppe, and that's of course where the Mongols came in from and so forth. So that was always a concern, right? The southern frontier areas there in the steppe. At any rate, steppe is a feminine e-noun, and so along the steppe would be по степи. And by the way, the locative of that, right, if we were in the steppe, prepositional, or again, speaking specifically of location, we would say stepi. So that happens sometimes too. I'm not sure we mentioned that the other day when we were reviewing the prepositional endings, right? We said that some masculine nouns have a stressed oo in the prepositional, again, when describing location. And there are a few e nouns that also take a stressed e, again, only when speaking of location. So the example of tini comes to mind, which means in the shade, tень, meaning shade or shadow. So that's fairly rare, but it is something that happens sometimes. Okay, along the shore of the Neva, по берегу Невы, 12, around a Russian monastery, if you were touring a monastery or something. По русскому монастырю, that's also in stressed. 13, Гостиный двор, which is a big sprawling imperial era shopping, basically a shopping mall in the middle of St. Petersburg. По гостиному двору, двор being in stressed. 14, along or around Red Square would be по Красной площади, an e-noun. Around the Winter Palace would be по Зимнему дворцу, which of course today is the Hermitage, right, the Hermitage Art Museum. And 16, around the Russian Museum, which is another very large museum in Petersburg dedicated to Russian art, right? In the Winter Palace, they have the vast majority of stuff there is European art, non-Russian art. Anyway, so по русскому музею, that's a soft masculine. Okay, what about the dative plural? Well, we saw it already, and again, we can sum this up very quickly. Adjectives are taking Again, soft ones would take im, or, for example, the 7-letter spelling rule might make us write im instead of And for nouns, we get The only exception would be a soft noun, which would take yam. Again, we have to watch out here with nouns for the 8-letter spelling rule. So again, as long as we remember spelling rules and hard versus soft, these plural endings are extremely easy. They work for all genders. So just a couple of examples. Новый успех, toward new successes, would be к новым успехам. You may have noticed at the end of most lessons, I wish you к новым победам, right? I charge you to push onward toward new victories, right? К новым победам. That's also dative plural. Okay, anyway, родители, there's a soft noun that would be к родителям, meaning if you're going to visit your parents. So there's a soft noun. And again, watch out for spelling rules, right? With adjectives, we're looking for the 7-letter rule. For nouns, we're watching for the 8-letter rule. So here we have both examples. К русским врачам. Right, again, русский is not inherently soft. We have here instead a 7-letter spelling rule issue. And also with врач, here it's just basically reminding us that we can't have yam there. Of course, this noun isn't inherently soft, but the point is that we could never have a yam after a ch, right? Instead, we have to write a. So just watch out for that issue. Okay, I was just thinking, a better example here might be something like a noun like a viesh, right? A feminine e noun, most of which, of course, end in a soft sign. I guess they all end in a soft sign, of course. And, so even while those are soft, like viesh, right, meaning a thing, or vieshi, the dative plural of that is not vieshyam, right? It's visham because we can't write a ya after a hushing consonant like sh, right? So that's the 8-letter spelling rule essentially. Okay, a quick poster. Детям всем полезен джем. Right, note the little rhyme. Детям всем полезен джем. And right, so детям there in the dative plural, and you notice that follows that slightly irregular pattern we saw. Right, the plural of ребенок is дети, meaning children. From that we get детям, right, the dative plural. So jam is useful or healthy for all children. Okay, so let's now go from dative singular to dative plural. Now remember, this should be very easy because we're not really worried about gender, right? Just hard versus soft. So по комнате would mean around the room. Around the rooms would be по комнатам. По парку, around the park. Around the parks would be по паркам. Along the island or around the island, по острову, the plural would be по островам. Now there we have to watch out for the stress shift. Remember, in the plural we may see a stress shift. We talked about that back in the right when we were learning the nominative plural. And remember, those stress shifts are going to carry over almost always throughout the plural. Okay, so ostrov is a masculine noun that takes stressed a in the nominative plural. We get ostrava, and therefore here we have по островам. Тротуар, по тротуару means along the sidewalk. Plural would be по тротуарам. Tunnel is a soft noun, meaning a tunnel, through a tunnel. По tunnelium would be the dative plural, right? Soft ending. Tunneliam. Шесть, по бару и ресторану would mean around a bar and a restaurant. But this would often be used in the plural, right? Like we were on a bar crawl or whatever. We were going from one bar and restaurant to another. That would be по барам и ресторанам. Семь, around a trade center or a shopping mall. Plural would be по торговым центрам. That could be said, for example, if you were making the rounds of shopping centers looking for something or whatever, doing shopping. Восемь, по кладбищу, around the cemetery. So around the cemeteries, plural would be по кладбищам. Okay, по музею и галерея, around a museum and gallery. So make that plural. По музеям и галереям, which would suggest, again, making the rounds of all the galleries and museums in a city, for example. As you all know, right, if you're in Moscow or Petersburg, you could spend weeks probably going to all the museums and galleries. Okay, 11. По стране Балтии would mean traveling, for example, around a Baltic country. If we made this plural, it would be по странам Балтии. There, again, we're dealing with a vowel shift. Strana, the feminine noun, in the plural, it's going to shift back to strany, and we would normally keep that in the dative plural, по странам. 12. Along the shore of the Neva. Well, what if we're going along the shores of the Neva? That would be по берегам Невы. По берегам Невы. And again, that берег is the singular. In the plural, we get, it's an in-stressed noun, and also in the plural, the nominative is берега, and so the dative plural is берегам. По тихой улице would mean along a quiet street. Plural would be по тихим улицам. And again, it may just, the 8-letter spelling rule may help you if you're in doubt that, we do have to write here. We could never write yam after tsa. But again, sometimes that's a little bit kind of overkill because улица is, after all, a hard noun. Okay, 14, along prospect. По длинному проспекту, plural would be по длинным проспектам. Okay, along the bridge would be по мосту, plural would be по мостам. Hard, masculine, in-stressed. 16, по площади would mean around the square. Plural would be по площадям. По площадям. And by the way, that's rather unusual. Again, we're back to this question of stress patterns, and we said we know. Let's take it slow here. It's kind of I'm getting ahead of myself. So, ploshage is a feminine noun. It's a soft noun. So we know that's going to take the ending yay. Now, often, but not always, that yay will be stressed. Again, it's one of those things that's not always entirely predictable. But at any rate, the genitive plural of ploshage is ploshidzei. That suggests that the remaining plural endings, including here the dative plural, will be in-stressed, and that's what we have, poploshidziam. So again, that's a little bit tricky in terms of the stress, but as we know, stress can be very tricky in Russian. Anyway, 17, po rekie kanalu would mean along a river and a canal. But more often, especially in Petersburg, you hear advertised, or you're often invited, you're walking along Nevsky and someone has a loudspeaker, and they invite you to take a tour, po rekam I kanalам, right, along the rivers and canals of Petersburg. So let's look at reka, right, two-syllable feminine. In the plural, the stress jumps back. We get reki, and we keep that stress throughout the plural. So that's why we end up with pa rekam I kanalám. Okay, so with that exercise, we saw, again, a couple of examples where the stress gets a bit tricky. So here, as we did yesterday, right, just looking at how, generally speaking, right, except for the exceptions, stress tends to be consistent across the singular and across the plural, right? So even where we have unexpected stress shifts in the plural, right, and most of that we discussed back 2 chapters ago when we learned the nominative plural, those changes carry over across the board in the plural. Now, again, there are exceptions to these rules, but this is a pretty reliable pattern. And as I mentioned before, if you want to see sort of the full picture, at least as best as I know to present it, you can find that in book 4. I think it's day 166 or 67. I'm guessing 167. Okay, so at any rate, again, we can always talk all day about stress, but this is a pretty reliable pattern. So take a look. Reka in the singular, parikia, moria pamoru, gorod pagorodu, vrach vrachu. Okay, that's an in-stress noun, so that's something a little bit different. Sistra sistria, brat kbratu. Okay, so with the one exception of vrach, which is an in-stress masculine noun, we see that the singular tends to stay on the same syllable throughout. But in the plural, no matter what sort of maybe bizarre stress shift we see, all the plural forms are showing that same stress. So rieki pariekam, maria pamariam, grada pagaradam, vrachik vracham, stiostri xiostram, bratia k bratiam. There we have a couple of those irregular nouns, right? So again, the stem changes unexpectedly, for example, with bratia in the plural, but it remains consistent, including here in the dative plural. Okay, so let's make a few dative plurals after k, right, going from singular to plural, and watch out for any of these stress shifts. Idem v gosti k sosedu, so we're going to visit our neighbor. Plural, remember, is sosedzi, so it becomes soft all of a sudden. So the dative plural here would be k sosediam, and that is irregular. That's just an irregular noun, as we know. It's soft all of a sudden in the plural. Number 2, я поеду в Москву к брату. Okay, plural, you're going to see your brothers would be к братьям. Она ездила к сестре. She went, complete round trip, to see her sister. To see her sisters would be к сестрам. Okay, 4, еду домой к родителю. You don't hear that too often, right? That would mean I'm going to see one parent. And of course, normally you would just say mom or dad or whatever. But so what would the plural be? К родителям, right? Soft dative plural. 5, это экскурсия по острову. This is an excursion around the island. Plural would be по островам. Again, that noun is one of those masculines that takes stressed a in the nominative plural. Ostrava, and so dative plural is по островам. 6, we were strolling along the shore. Мы гуляли по берегу. Берег in the nominative plural is берега, so dative plural is по берегам. 7, я все время хожу к врачу. I'm always going to the doctor. Okay, multiple doctors would be к врачам. Vrach is an in-stress masculine. Dative plural к врачам. 8. По какой стране ты ездил? Around what country were you traveling? Plural, okay, let's think for a minute. Страна in the singular, plural, the stress jumps back to страны. And so dative plural would be по каким странам ты ездил? 9. Мама едет к сыну. Okay, that's an irregular noun, right? Plural in the nominative would be сыновья. We keep that new stem in the dative as well. Мама едет к сыновьям. 10. Папа часто ездил к дочери. So he often would go to see his daughter. Plural would be к дочерям. К дочерям. Right? It's soft, of course. 11. Собака бегала по полю. The dog was running around the field. Plural would be по полям. По полям. Again with that stress shift for two-syllable neuters. 12. Судя по письму, ему хорошо. Judging by, in accordance with his letter, he's doing well. Okay, plural, let's think. Письмо is the singular. Письма would be the nominative plural with the stress shift. And so dative plural is по письмам, judging by his letters. Судя по письмам, ему хорошо. Okay, let's give a few nouns here, just using them simply as direct objects. So, and again, in the dative plural, I've given you the dative singular, right? Мы подарили ребенку игрушки. We gave the child presents, toys, sorry. Children, plural would be мы подарили детям игрушки. Right, again, these nouns some of these are a bit irregular. We have to be careful. Mama дает сыну молоко. Mom gives milk to her son. Plural would be мама дает сыновьям молоко. 3. Хозяин налил гостю водки. So the host poured for his guest, dative, some vodka. There's a partitive genitive. Okay, multiple guest would be хозяин налил гостям водки. 4. Он рассказывал другу о поездке. Right, he was telling his friend about the trip. Plural would be друзьям, right, that from друзья, that irregular plural. 5. Профессор все объясняет студенту. The professor is explaining everything to the student, singular. Plural, that's just an ordinary hard adjective. That would be студентам. 6. I want to show to my neighbor my car. I want to show my car to my neighbor. Я хочу показать соседям мою машину. Right, so соседям, again, that becomes soft in the plural. That's an irregularity. Okay, a quick overview of special modifiers and pronouns. Again, these we just have to watch out for. They're always maybe a bit unexpected. Note especially the тем and всем, right? Those are in the black boxes. Those are the ones you probably would never guess. Now, reviewing also just uses of the dative. We know that the dative is used for indirect objects, right? Also following certain prepositions, most of which we've just reviewed, and also as the objects of certain verbs, right, which simply take the dative. And here's a quick summary of some major ones we've seen so far. Now, also, the dative is used in all sorts of other subjectless expressions that we've discussed at some length, right? Especially, for example, with modal adverbs, надо, можно, невозможно, and so forth. So, for example, I need to do something would be мне надо, followed by an infinitive, right? It's necessary for me or to me. Now, with predicate adverbs, most of these have to do with how we feel, right? Those are also used in subjectless expressions with the dative. So again, that should be all old hat. We talked about that at some length, right? Now we were just able to use those same expressions with the dative plural. Okay, here's a poster. Воины Красной Армии и Военно-Морского флота. Okay, so we're addressing the soldiers of the Red Army and the Navy, right? This means literally something like the Военно-Морского флота. A flot is a navy, and then военный, that little part has to do with war, and морской is an adjective for море, so it means something of the sea. So it's kind of a fancy way of saying what flot itself basically means, just the navy. Anyway, беспощадно мстите гитлеровским детоубийцам, right? Take merciless vengeance on the Hitlerite child murderers. And you see that this is in Petersburg. We can see the Petropavlovskaya Krepость there in the back and the Strelka. And, right, this is alluding to the bombings, the Nazi bombings of Leningrad, right? It was called at the time during the siege of Leningrad in World War II. So we see there that the verb mstить, which means to take vengeance on, that also takes the dative. So that's a verb we don't use a whole lot in this class, but it's just another example of one of these verbs that we would say simply take the dative. And here we see dative plural, Gitlerovskim детоубийцам, right? Hitlerite killers of children. Дети, of course, means children, and убийца means a murderer. Okay, so let's fill in some blanks here, just dative after these verbs and whatnot, just various uses of the dative. Okay, some of these are going to involve special modifiers, right? So I don't believe all my friends. Я не верю всем своим друзьям. There, note the всем, that's the unexpected one. We always help our parents. Мы всегда помогаем нашим родителям. 3, все, meaning everyone here, all people, everyone. Again, the dative plural of that will be всем. Заткнись, shut up. You're keeping everyone from sleeping. You're preventing everyone from sleeping. Okay, so this verb мешать, which means to bother or to annoy or to prevent or something, it takes the dative. So we get ты всем мешаешь спать. You're keeping everyone from sleeping. 4, my brothers are too lazy to look for work. Or they don't feel like it. They feel too lazy to do it. Моим братьям лень искать работу. 5, мы. Okay, so there's just a pronoun, right? Нам страшно смотреть фильмы ужасов. And by the way, we learned all those pronoun forms back in the day, right back in book 1, I think, when we first introduced the dative. But anyway, нам страшно смотреть фильмы ужасов. It's scary for us to watch horror movies. 6, where are the kids? It's time for them to go to bed. Okay, so we need the plural, dative plural of они. That's going to be им. Им пора ложиться спать. It's time for them, plural, to go to bed. 7, соседи. Our music was bothering the neighbors. Sorry, it was keeping them from studying. Наша музыка мешала соседям заниматься. 8, сестры. Sisters, did you help your sisters buy clothes or shop for clothes? Ты помогла сестрам покупать одежду? Эти люди, these people, we have to believe these people. Okay, so поверить, that takes the dative plural here. We get этим людям. Этим людям надо поверить. 10, I recommend this beer to everyone. I really recommend it. Очень советую. Я всем очень рекомендую or очень советую это пиво. 11, мужья, husbands, plural. Right, that's an irregular plural if you remember, right? Муж, singular, plural, мужья. Мужьям бывает трудно понять своих жен. So, kind of a silly sentence, but it's hard sometimes for husbands to understand their wives. So, dative plural, мужьям. And then the follow-up, жены. Женам тоже бывает трудно понять мужей, right? Wives also sometimes have a hard time understanding their husbands. Okay, 13, мои подруги, my girlfriends, my female friends. So it was interesting for them to stroll around Moscow. Dative plural, моим подругам было интересно гулять по Москве. And again, there's one of those subjectless constructions with an adverb like интересно, and we get there the dative used with it. 14, студенты. Students often find it boring at lectures. They're often bored at lectures. Dative plural, subjectless construction. Студентам бывает трудно на лекциях. 15, вы, just a pronoun. Что вы делаете? Как вам не стыдно, right? Literally, how is it not shameful for you? How do you not feel ashamed of yourself? Right? Do you have no shame? 16, эти англичане. Okay, remember we glimpsed that the other day, that англичанин is an unusual noun, right? In the plural, the in drops off, and in the nominative, we get anglichania, but everywhere else it's going to be hard. And so this would be этим англичанам. Этим англичанам будет весело в России, right? These English people will have a fun time in Russia. And again, that's an unusual verb type. We're going to study that in a bit more detail in Book 4. Okay, so that does it for today. That does it for the dative, right? Again, there's not much else to say about it, right? We know the singular and the plural, so try to get those endings under your belt. And tomorrow, the last day of new endings, right? Instrumental plural, and then we'll move on to new к новым победам, right? To new victories. So anyway, that's all for today. До свидания, товарищи. And as always, вперед к новым победам.